Good evening and welcome to the Township of Woolwich Council meeting on October 24th, 2023. We are now live on YouTube. It's great to see all those attending in person. This is the second week in a row that we've had a full house, so it's been a long time. It's great. So welcome to everyone here and everyone tuning into the live stream. I'm going to start with a roll call. I'm Mayor Johnson, present and chairing this meeting. Councillor Bryant. Present. Councillor Burgess.
Present.
Councillor Cadeau.
Present.
Councillor Grant. Present. Councillor Schwint.
Present.
Thank you. I need a motion that council reconvenes in open session. Moved by Councillor Grant, seconded by Councillor Bryant. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. I assume you're in favor, Councillor Schwinn.
Yes.
Thanks. I'm going to start by acknowledging that the land on which we live has been here from time immemorial, and Indigenous people have lived here from time immemorial. I thank the Chinatan, also called the Attawandaron or neutral people, the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee people who have lived here and cared for this land and who continue to share and steward the land with us. May we together learn to care for each other, our flora and fauna, and the land that sustains us. So this morning I was listening to CBC reports of the war in Israel and Gaza. And one of the reports coming from the area is that over 2,000 children have been killed. I don't know if that's an accurate report or not, but either way, it's clear that thousands of people have been and are being killed. I also have a habit, probably a bad habit, of reviewing Facebook posts in the morning. And this morning, I saw a post in which an American Israeli woman and an American Palestinian woman ended up sitting beside each other on a train. To give you a Reader's Digest version, they had a very touching conversation, sharing how the war had similarly affected both of them. They looked at each other as two women on a similar journey, and they embraced. The blogger asked for peace. And I also like to read about things from thousands and hundreds of thousands of years ago, and realize that we are here in this world for a very short period of time. And putting all of those pieces together this Friday also marks the start of the Poppy campaign for Remembrance Day. They are available at the Legion and our municipal offices, but it also is a time when we remember the wars that have been fought and are being fought and look for peace. So in the moment of silence, I ask that we remember our brothers and sisters across the globe, but especially those touched by the conflict in Israel and Gaza. And in whatever form is yours, take a moment to pray or just embrace the thought of peace. So let's take a moment. Thank you. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest from council? I have a declaration on 10.1, and that would be the George Charles on the High Street reconstruction I declared last week in committee, and it's the same this week. Okay. Items to come forward from closed session. We have an appointment, excuse me, to this to the St. Jacobs Business Improvement Area Board. So a motion that the Council of the Township of Woolwich, considering report C 31-2023, respecting an appointment to the St. Jacobs Business Improvement Area, appoints Sharice Bauman to the board until the expiration of the term of council that appointed them, or until successors are appointed, as long as they continue to be a qualified board member. Do I have a mover? Councillor Schwint, second, Councillor Burgess, all those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. We have minutes from council September 19th, special council planning minutes from October 3rd, committee of the whole minutes from October 17th, and special council minutes from October 17th. Can I have a mover and a seconder for those? Councillor Grant and Councillor Bryant. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. The following portion of the meeting is for information only, and no decisions will be made tonight. Any questions can be directed to Development Services staff following the meeting. I declare the planning public meeting to be open. And this is a zone change application by Michelle Shannon. And I will call on planner Sharon Maloney to provide council with an overview. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Council. The subject property is located at 1189 Weeby Place. RBA Planning Consultants Limited, on behalf of the owner, Michelle Shannon, have submitted a rezoning application for 1189 Weeby Place. The property is zoned agricultural and is currently 39.8 hectares in size and located within the countryside prime agricultural area. The applicant is proposing a site-specific agricultural amendment to recognize a reduced farm parcel size of approximately 34.4 hectares, whereas 40 hectares is required. The zone change is to facilitate in the severance and conveyance of 5.4 hectares south of the creek to 1094 Northfield as a lot addition. Staff is available for questions. Note, the consultant is in attendance.
Thank you. Mr. Black, you're here. Do you want to present to council? Welcome.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, public who are in attendance. My name is Bob Black and I'm with RBA Planning Consultants Limited here in Elmira. And I am representing John G. Weber in addition to the applicant in this particular case, the rezoning, Michelle Shannon and John B. Weber. Further to my presentation submission, which I believe you all have a copy. I'd like to provide some additional background to understand why this application is being made. If you could, please refer to the report map, which is the last page in the staff information report. It's an air photo that shows all three properties that are involved in the rezoning application. The farm at 1094 Northfield Drive is owned by John G. Weber, who with his family, they operate a 51 hectare, 126 acre dairy farm. They currently have 54 kilograms of milk quota being filled by milking 38 head of Holstein cows. The farm reproduces most of their replacement cows, grows the majority of their own feed, corn silage, wheat, barley, and hay. The existing two-story bank barn is at its maximum milking capacity. An expansion to the barn in the current location is not feasible because of MDS setback requirements from the Conestogo settlement. John Weber's family is interested in continuing with the farming operation, and they have had discussions about building a new dairy barn with a milking parlor and loose housing for approximately 80, perhaps to 100 cows. This is the main reason that they would like to obtain 5.4 hectares from 1189 Weeby Place And in addition, 3.6 hectares from Weber Land Limited. The new dairy barn would be built using these two parcels with access for the milk truck being provided to Weeby Place. There is no rezoning application for Weber Land Limited property because the 3.6 hectare severance will not reduce the remnant farm parcel below the minimum lot size of 40 hectares. They'll have, with the severance, they will have remaining about 43 hectares with their farm. A planning justification report has been submitted in support of the planning application addressing how the PPS, the regional and township official plan policies have been complied with. In particular, the policy in the official plan relating to farm size and its continued viability with less acreage has been addressed. In this instance, the existing creek already physically separates the farm operation, and as such, it has not been part of the farm operation for a number of years. The conveyance of this parcel south of the creek will not affect continued viability of the farm. In conclusion, then, the rearranging of lot lines from 1189 Weeby Place and the lands owned by Weber Land Limited and conveyance to John G. Weber at 1094 Northfield Drive is considered, in my opinion, good planning for the following reasons. Firstly, the proposal complies with and implements the policies in the PPS, which is a provincial policy statement, the growth plan, the region and the township official plans as outlined in our justification report. The proposal will provide compatibility with 2 settlement areas, allowing the agricultural use to continue with the next farming generation while still maintaining compliance with MDS setbacks. The reduced farm size for 1189 Weeby Place will remain viable and economical, as are other undersized parcels throughout Woolwich Township. The proposed lot frontage on Weeby Place for the Weber Land Limited consent application will provide for the proposed driveway access to the dairy barn to be completely outside GRCA's 3.6.20 floodway elevation. And this proposal will support and encourage John G. Weber's family to remain on the farm and continue with a viable and economically sound dairy farming operation. Those are my submissions, Madam Chair. If there are any questions, I will answer them, or John G. Weber actually is in attendance at the meeting, and if I can't, he sure can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Council, are there any questions? I'm not sure I asked for questions after staff's presentation, so I'll take questions for either. No, I'm
Thank you, Madam
not
Chair.
seeing any. Thank you. Jeff, are there any unregistered participants in the meeting?
Through you, Mayor Sean, there are no unregistered participants this evening.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone here that wants to speak to the submission? No? Not seeing any. I declare the planning public meeting to be over. Thank you. And you're certainly welcome to stay. We've got some really neat presentations tonight, so you might find it interesting. Our very first presentation is a contingent speaking to Dan Snyder's Community Legacy and Community Center Enhancements. And we have Graham Snyder, Rob Waters, and Paul Lucier here to talk about this Dan Snyder Community Legacy and some enhancements, suggestions that they have for the community center. Welcome to all three of you. And Graham, I know you've been doing a few different presentations and remembrances from your son, Dan. And I think I'm happy to have you here to talk to us. So the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Shantz, David Brenneman, and Woolwich councilors for having us here this evening. We are currently in the process of forming a committee to further enhance our beautiful recreational facility, which is the envy of many communities across this province. Currently, myself, Rob Waters, who stands beside me, and Paul Lucier are here tonight, and we've volunteered along with Ken Sealing, which I'm sure many of you know, and Larry Devitt, which you probably know as well and have a history here in this community. 14 years after the Woolwich Memorial Center was built, we now see an opportunity to showcase the amazing athletes from this community. We would like to see displays in different areas of the building to show the history of our sports community, and also a permanent display honoring the memories of Don Farr, Jim McLeod, and Dan Snyder. Beginning with the recognition of our hockey legends, and there have been a few in this community, which I'm sure you know their names. And then moving on to including other sports. Our plan is to work with the Woolwich Recreation Department and to help coordinate this effort. Now, I'm sure one of the questions that might be on your minds is how much is that going to cost? So I'm going to ask Rob Waters to speak briefly about that.
Hi, Mayor Shantz and the members of council. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to speak tonight. As far as the financials go for a project like this, we are in the infancy stages, so we don't have any firm costs that might be associated with something like this. But it would be, at this point, we don't have any firm commitments on any of the asks, so to speak, on what this would run. We are highly committed to fundraising, reaching out to members in our community and businesses throughout our community to help cover the costs for this. But having said that, one of the things that we're looking forward to doing is collaborating with council and staff and helping source some potential funding that might be available through whether it be municipal, regional, or provincial or federal funding that might be out there to help cover the costs, subsidize the costs, or potentially cover all the costs. And tapping into your expertise might help tremendously on an initiative like that. But yeah, like I said, this is a great opportunity to recognize some of the great accomplishments that people have had in this community. And when people come visit our community, they can see some of the great successes that have come out of Woolwich. So once we have some more commitment on what the costs might be, then we can circle back and discuss what the overall plan is and what the costs might be involved with that. So I'll pass it back over to Graham.
Thanks, Rob. At this point, I guess I'd ask if you have questions, we'll try and answer them as best we can.
Okay, thank you for coming and bringing your ideas forward. I know you're just sort of getting started with it, but I've had occasion over the years to be in a lot of arenas and community centers, and it's always really fun to read historically about people from the community. So I think it's a great initiative. Council, questions? Comments? No. Okay, David.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, to council. A few weeks ago, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Graham, and he talked passionately about the fact that, as he said earlier, it's been 14 years And it's time to look at, maybe there's some enhancements and, sometimes we take for granted, you walk into a facility, and, people just know, oh, why is that the Dan Snyder Arena? Why is that Jim McLeod? But there really isn't anything of any substantial nature to be able to show a picture and show a description, even, in that sense, for people to understand some of the legacy behind the building of the complex, why these names were put in place. Graham also mentioned at that time, what I know as being a hockey dad, that, yeah, there's rinks you go in across this province and small towns, and you see displays of sports stars, whether that's hockey, baseball, softball, soccer, whatever the case may be. And, so I just wanted to mention to council that, conversations did happen a few weeks ago. Certainly from a staff level, we think these are easy, simple enhancements that we can work with the group on. I've already had the pleasure of talking with Ann MacArthur, the Director of Recreation Community Services. We certainly would recommend, that council supports us working with this group and working through the logistics. But they seem like simple but necessary improvements 14 years after the building of this complex. But I also wanted, Graham to come forward because it's 20 years since the passing of Dan, and certainly for many people, it's a good opportunity to remember, that passing, and also really the passion that exuded, out of the community in terms of building this rec complex ultimately, and naming one of the arenas, and all of the fundraising efforts that came from the community, and Graham and the foundation and the community that was just so passionate about this rec complex. So considering, we're web streaming now, it's a great reminder, sometimes of reflection as well, on some of the legacy, but also the improvements that we can make going forward.
Thank you. And I know Jake coached Luke in hockey, and I can still find number 13 pins in my house from the
Yeah.
tributes that they paid
Yes.
to him. So thank you very much for
Okay.
coming in tonight, and we look forward to hearing more details when you get them
Yes.
worked out.
We'll keep you posted.
Super.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next, I'm going to move for our next presentation. This is a different view for me. Okay, so there was a situation that occurred during a Friday evening public swim. A guard responsible for guarding the lap pool recognized an individual having a suspected seizure in the shallow end. This guard quickly alerted fellow guards of the situation and went to provide direct support to this individual. The guard team was required to remove the individual from the pool and provided first aid care. With the seizure being a major incident, the guard team notified 911 to ensure the proper care of the individual was provided. The individual was not required to go to the hospital and was cleared to go home. If this team had not responded so efficiently as they did, the outcome could have been much more severe. So on behalf of council, I would like to thank 5 extraordinary individuals who leapt into action and rescued a victim at our pool. Okay, there's only 3 of you. Okay, this is not 5, I can count. There's 3 of them here. But on behalf of council, I want to thank you for what you did and recognize you for what you did. No one can ever have enough training to prepare you for what this moment will actually feel like. But because of your collective efforts, the individual was able to receive the medical care that they needed. Woolwich Township is very proud to have high caliber lifeguards who oversee our pool. So please accept these certificates of appreciation as a small token. And let's see, Jameson Meisner, thank you. Jonah Schmidt, thank you. Get to the right one. Lily Thompson, thank you. And also absent are jailist sergeant and Olivia Weber, and we'll make sure they get these. So thank you very much. Yeah, on the job training. Okay. Turn this on. Next, we're excited to welcome Miss Canada Earth 2024, Alina Singh. Alina is a Breslau resident who will be representing Canada at the Miss Earth pageant next year. The Miss Earth pageant advocates for environmental awareness, conservation, social responsibility, and is broadcast live in more than 80 countries. Alina has an honors Bachelor of Commerce from McMaster University and currently works as an accountant for Ontario Health. She has a passion and having trouble tonight with my she has a passion for empowering women and survivors of sexual assault through volunteering her time and expertise to offer financial education and support. She also supports women's shelters by supplying essential hygiene products, believing that every small gesture can make a big difference. Congratulations, Alina, and we'd love you to take a few moments to share some words about your incredible journey and the work you're doing in the community. Good to see you.
Thank you so much. That's such a great welcome and greetings to the council and the mayor. Last time when I met the mayor, I was Miss Waterloo region, which I represented amazingly at Miss Canada. And I'm so proud to say that I will be representing the entire country now at Miss Earth. As I prepare to head over to Miss Earth now next year, my goal is to be able to work in a project that offsets my carbon footprint. And I want to do that by planting as many trees as possible. And I want to do that by working in an organization that is an advocate for planting trees and also educating the youth. I think in order to make a difference and in order to really cause a change, we need education. Where there's education and awareness, there will be change. And that is what I'm advocating for. And if you want to follow my journey, I'd love to share my contacts. And I'd love to partner with organizations as well that believe in planting trees and educating the youth to really make a difference. And I really want to make Canada proud and stand out at next year Miss Earth annual competition. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And all the best on your journey to Miss Earth. We look forward to welcoming you as Miss Earth. Miss World Earth? Miss Earth. Thank you. And next, we have a presentation from Mary Jane Patterson and Patrick Gilbride of Reep Green Solutions on their annual report. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you very much. We do have some slides there. Just while we're waiting for that, just let me say that it's great to be here and hear all these uplifting presentations. And certainly tree planting is close to our hearts as well, which we'll touch on. So there we go. So good evening, Mayor Shantz, members of council, and to staff. We're here to share our most recent impact report for the 2022-2023 period, and some of the success stories from across the region that people have achieved with our support. Next slide, please. Specifically, we've tracked over 3,000 meaningful actions that people in the community have taken. You can skip over this one. No problem. But informed by our vision, which you saw on the last slide, we've set a goal of 10,000 actions over the 10-year period between 2020 to 2030. And we're more than a third of the way, 30% of the way after 3 years of meaningful actions that people have taken. And all of these actions represent things that people have done that are moving us towards a resilient, low carbon future. Next slide, please. So in the spirit of thinking globally and acting locally, these meaningful actions contribute to several of the UN Sustainable Development Goals that will put our community on a pathway to a more sustainable future for everyone. And thinking globally, we're certainly rooting for Miss Earth Canada as well. So next slide, please. Climate Action WR is a key pillar of that collaborative approach that will be necessary to make progress on those SDGs. We co-lead Climate Action WR with Sustainable Waterloo Region and in partnership with the Township of Woolwich and all of our area municipalities. So this year, as part of Climate Action, we released our 2020 inventory report, met people at community events, and we supported our volunteer sector committees to do some really cool projects, which you can see some examples there in the bullets. Next slide, please. Last year was a high point for home energy evaluations, thanks to the Greener Homes program through the federal government and Enbridge gas incentives. Here in Woolwich, residents took advantage to invest over $200,000 in energy efficient retrofits. And as you can see across the entire region, that magnified to over 4 million in investments, which will result in 410 tons of carbon saved, and that's year over year. So every year that'll be saved. Next slide, please. Last year, we told you about the research we did into energy poverty and equity in home energy loan programs. This past year, since we were really at the forefront of that research, we shared that with other municipalities across Canada. You can see here, we presented at Toronto City Hall to the Clean Air Partnership. Next slide. So in partnership with four municipalities now, we worked with residents to plant trees, install rain gardens, and reduce runoff from their properties. Stormwater runoff is a major concern, especially in our built-up urban areas with impervious surfaces. And all of these small actions add up to a resilient, to make us more resilient to the impacts of climate change from extreme heat, which we've experienced more and more of over our summers, as well as the ever-present risk of flooding. So we're also pleased to partner with forward-thinking organizations like Trees for Woolwich. Through our Tree of the Year campaign this past summer, we recognized the importance of our legacy trees. We actually wrote a blog post and nominated the elm trees that were quite literally uncovered at the Elmira Nature Reserve. That was really fun. It was kind of like a scavenger hunt where people saw trees kind of throughout the region. So we're also drawing inspiration from the Trees for Woolwich nursery, and we're starting up another nursery to grow smaller stock. And hopefully that will feed into the roadside planting project that Trees for Woolwich is leading, which is really an inspiration. And we just wanted to say that that's recognized that Woolwich is really truly a leader in terms of tree planting. So now I'll turn it over to Mary Jane to talk about some of the other work we do.
Good evening, everyone. It's great to be back. I'm going to bring us back. Oh, next slide. Thanks. I'm going to bring us back inside the house and reflect a little on a program that came to an end for us last year, which was delivering home water reviews, which are like a water conservation audit for homes to show people how to save water. And looking back on our 5 years delivering this in partnership with the region of Waterloo, we realized that we went to close to 2,000 homes. And the neat thing about this visit is that we installed measures on the spot wherever it was possible. So 1,500 measures were installed over that time period that right away began saving water in the home. 52 of those reviews were for Woolwich residents over the last 5 years, including 6 this past year. So we've really been honored to be part of delivering this program. It carries on. And we carry on our work with the region on water conservation in other ways, such as workshops and working to reduce salt that is to safeguard our drinking water. We really look for ways that we can engage people in their sustainability journey, whether they own a home or rent, or whether they can come in person or not. And I would say that is a lesson we took from COVID, where we had to move all our workshops online. We're keeping some of them online now as we come out of COVID. It's great to be back in person for some of the workshops, but we are having some online, and going forward, we'll continue to do that. They're just more accessible to some participants. The Zero Waste Challenge is another way that we look to engage people. Almost anybody can participate in this. This is my jar. I'm participating in the 30-day challenge, which is when I try to put everything that would go to landfill in this jar, anything that can't be composted or recycled. Now, I must confess that this was interrupted by other things going on. I really recognize we do the best we can. And what do we learn from this? And every year I realize the snacking habits that I have, and also think about systemic issues too. And one of them is that I spent a lot of time in Chatham, where I'm from, this past month, and there's no green bin there. And I really want to recognize our region for having a compost program. I love the green bin in the women's bathroom that you have here. I don't see them in all the municipal office buildings that I go to. I think that I appreciate the work we've already done systemically in our community to reduce waste. This is an open invitation to counselors and staff to, whether you officially register or not, try this sometime. You can use a plastic bag. You can, I know Mayor Shantz, you have done this and we've appreciated it. It's really revealing what kind of waste we are sending every day. And if we just stop and gather it for 7 days and take a look at it, it might give us some ideas about how to reduce that. This year we have more new participants than we've ever had. So that's kind of fun to see people trying it out. Okay. We have a great resource in the Reep House for Sustainable Living that demonstrates all the kinds of surfaces that Patrick and I have been talking about today. We were also thrilled to welcome the Prime Minister to come and visit the Reep House this past year and show him the kinds of things we were doing. He was in town promoting the Greener Homes project that Patrick talked about. And this is something that we don't have any direct funding for. It's core funding that helps us manage to keep it open and have open houses and tours through it. So what's coming up next for Reep? We talked to you in the past about the work we did to bring all these partners around the table to think about what a loan program would look like for Waterloo Region to help people cover the capital cost of home energy upgrades. Patrick talked about the $4 million spent this year across the region that stimulates the economy and also makes those homes more energy efficient. Some people don't have the upfront capital to make that investment, and a loan program can help cover that for them. The next steps, now that we've designed what this program might look like, are in the hands of the region, and they are working to bring it forward to Regional Council for approval. So Mayor Shantz, I think you may have been in a committee. I don't know if you happen to be there, but I believe it's come before one committee already. And it's kind of teed up, I hope, to come to Regional Council sometime this fall. And that will be to secure approval to apply to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities to get the money to backstop the loans that we can then offer in our community. So something to keep an eye out that's coming up. A little note about how we finance our work. It's a real mixture and we want that. We like the diversity. We sometimes are under contract to a municipality to deliver a service. Sometimes homeowners are paying the cost of the service. Sometimes it's a combination, like the tree planting program where it's subsidized. And other programs are grant funded where we look for all the money we can and cook up great ideas and try to bring those resources to our community. We have a small amount of donations also that keeps this covered. And an important piece of this is core funding. And that really leads me to our final slide. And a very big thank you for the support of the region of Waterloo as a core funder of Reep Green Solutions. Mayor Shantz, a thank you to you as a member of Regional Council for that support. It really helps to even the keel for Reep as programs come and go, contracts come and go. It helps us steady on, apply for the next one and keep things going. So we say a big thanks to these core funders. A thanks also to the Woolwich staff that we get to work with. Ann Roberts and Inga Rini especially have been great to work with this past year. And I want to say a special thanks also. Appeared before this council many times, and I am stepping down from Reep. I'm retiring in December. So thanks for all the support over all these years and the great work that the township is doing.
Thank you. And Mary Jane, we should say a big thank you to you because Reep has really taken off over the years, and that doesn't happen without a lot of hard work and good leadership. And I know you've provided both. So thank you for setting the region on a good trajectory. Any questions? No. Thank you very much for presenting tonight and all the best in your retirement. And I'm assuming we'll see Patrick again, perhaps. Yeah? Okay, thank you. And our final presentation tonight, we have Chief Mark Kroll, Superintendent Sloden Lakovic, Staff Sergeant Griffiths, Staff Sergeant McSween, and David Mullock from the Waterloo Region Police Service. And welcome. It's good to have you all here. I look forward to your presentation.
Thanks very much, Mayor Shantz, all members of council, staff, and all those present here and online. It's a pleasure to be here. And Mr. Brenneman, thanks very much as well. So joined here tonight by the members that you've mentioned. They represent our neighborhood policing, deployment, also government relations, Mr. Mullock there. Jay McSween, our rural staff sergeant, is a new role that I'll speak about. And also Scott Griffiths oversees our traffic services unit. So if you move to the next slide, please. It's my honor to help serve this community on behalf of our entire police service. Started this journey almost a year ago as your chief of police, but have also been joined by two amazing deputy chiefs, Deputy Chief Jen Davis and Deputy Chief Eugene Fenton. And if you move to the next slide, you'll see that we represent a service of about 1,200 full-time members. We have about 830 sworn police officers. Half of those you would see deployed in the community in regular patrol and specialized capacities. The other half work in a number of plainclothes specialized units and a number of initiatives around the service. The other members of our service, about 370 to 400, are civilian professionals who provide a variety of services, including all the administrative areas, special constable duties, and communications, and so on. We're also supported by about a few hundred volunteers that provide auxiliary support, some of our ceremonial duties through the band and chorus, as well as victim services and so on. Very proud to serve this community. And I think for those of us who have grown up here or close by, we've lost some sense of how big we are. We are not only the 10th largest community in Canada, but outside of the GTA, we're the 7th largest police service in Ontario and the 12th largest in Canada. So we're a big enterprise. And if you move to the next slide, It just speaks to the total capacity in which we try to provide service. So there's about 1,300 square kilometers in the region of Waterloo. That is more than double the city of Toronto. And I'm very fond of letting the Toronto chief know that we're covering a lot of ground, but that provides challenges to us. With the robust, vibrant urban landscape, there's also the rural townships. And that's the purpose of being here tonight, is to express our commitment to you and to all rural communities, but especially Woolwich Township. To the next slide, just highlights that we are a values-driven organization, and our vision is that every citizen in this region not only is safe, but feels safe. And we recognize that that's a precious, difficult thing to sustain. It requires investment, it requires great communication and commitment. And we recognize that that is something that you can help us with every day to ensure that we're meeting the needs of your community. The next slide just highlights the level of service that we're providing on an annual basis. Every year, our service demands are growing. Right now, or last year, we had 339,000 calls for service, and that's an average of about 800 calls for service per day. And that's a wide range of activities: emergency response, regular calls for help, certainly assisting our emergency service partners, paramedics, fire services across the region, and also some of our self-generated activity in response to community calls for service as well. So the next slide highlights just an overview of our 2022 response to Woolwich Township. And we had over 7,000 calls for service. That was a 5.5% year-over-year increase. And so you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen that the vast majority of our engagements in this community are traffic related. And so that comprises a lot of vehicle stops, response to dedicated traffic enforcement and road safety initiatives, and also a number one of priority calls for service, ranging from the highest priority to those of a lesser priority. And the next slide highlights our commitment to our traffic response and road safety efforts. And we've recognized year over year that the vast majority of our serious vehicle collisions and those fatal motor vehicle collisions often revolve around the fatal 4 offenses, and that is speeding and aggressive driving, impaired driving, distracted driving, and adherence to wearing seatbelts. And so with the community's support and pointing to the highest levels of need, especially on the long stretches of rural roads where people do tend to speed, that's where our efforts are often focused. But we do have programs that allow the community to alert us to areas and intersections where we can be most useful, most visible, and seeking to meet the needs of this community. So our targeted enforcement efforts, for an example, in July to September of 2023, were about 374 calls in response to road safety offenses. So our rural policing strategy is something we've developed this year to ensure that we are committed to this community. So with me tonight is Staff Sergeant Jay McSween, a dedicated resource to the rural community. And Jay can serve as an access point to teams of teams to ensure that we're meeting the needs of this community in every shape and form. We're also trying to ensure that we're providing meaningful and regular communication and engagement beyond just traffic enforcement, beyond just calls for service demand. With so much ground to cover, it's important that we can meet the community, to hear people, to have touch points whenever possible in a proactive, positive way. Try to also immerse ourselves in as many community activities, celebrations, and points of recognition as possible. Also, this council will know that we have recently departed a longstanding storefront in Elmira, which was a police station that provided a regular touch point and access point to the community. And that is a regular ongoing evaluation for us, is how can we maintain our visible presence in this community. And so we have access points to all 6 fire stations, which is a regular stop-in point for our officers, to use facilities, to meet members of the public if possible, and also to do some of their administrative work. But the model that we have right now is one that is really mobile. Across the world, we're seeing in times of fiscal constraint, needing to move away from some of the bricks and mortar stopping points that we've had in the past. Not to say that we're ruling it out, but even we've had through the pandemic, we've restricted some of our access at the front of our Kitchener, Cambridge, Waterloo stations and beyond. So that can be a conversation that is evolving with this community, because we have in some of the other rural townships some dedicated space and time spent in community centers. The next slide just speaks to the evolution of police work in general. As much as we will always need to be present, visible, and responsive to calls for service, much of our work is now has an online digital element. Almost every call for service now has some form of digital evidence. We're seeing an ever-increasing landscape of offenses, thefts, frauds, exploitation of all kinds in the online sphere. And so that is another challenge for us, using and harnessing technology in every form, but it's also, keeping us a little behind closed doors. So the visibility of policing has changed, because so much of our work is online, is working with people locally, provincially, nationally, and globally to combat crime that impacts residents of this region and this township. So I could expand more on that, but just one example where we're deploying ever-increasing technology is we're about halfway through our deployment of body-worn camera technology. We have we've just deployed automated license plate readers in all of our frontline vehicles, which has a front-facing camera capacity, license plate reader capacity, and that is one of many technologies that will be combined and intertwined over years, where we're involving camera technology to allow us and our investigators and our officers the best evidence possible, providing consistency, cohesion, and accountability. The next slide just speaks to our commitment and purpose in being here. This is a short visit, and I'm trying to stay within the timelines, but it's our commitment to making this a regular stopping point as much as Mayor and Council wish us to be here. Through our regular communication on a monthly basis, we're trying to give this government a sense of our activity and our commitment on a regular basis, and we want to make sure it's a two-way reciprocal engagement. And the next slide just highlights that we are celebrating our 50th year as a regional police service. And as much as we are celebrating many years of dedicated service recognizing the strong history, we're also looking ahead and recognizing as this community grows, the needs will change, and the need to communicate better and more earnestly will change and evolve as well. So the last slide just signifies a thanks to Council for the warm invitation here. And we look forward to regular touch points outside of Council, but whenever invited to come back. So subject to any questions or comments, thank you very much for the honor of being here.
Okay. Thank you for coming and speaking to us. You covered a lot of things, and I know I sort of scribbling down a question and then you answered it. Okay, well, I don't have to ask that one. So a great presentation. In the spirit of two-way communication, Council, do you have any questions for Chief Kroll? Councillor Cadeau.
Thanks, Mayor. Through you, just a point of clarification on slide 7. It mentions Wilmot. I'm just wondering if the data is related to Wilmot or Woolwich.
As a chief, I will own that error, but I can tell you it's purely administrative error. We have a similar presentation on Monday. So as we updated this slide, I apologize to Council. That was an oversight and an administrative correction that we actually got wrong. So we sought to update the slide and just made that mistake. But the data on that slide is consistent with Woolwich Township. Yeah.
Excellent. And that frames the next question I have, because in that slide, it mentions a 19-minute response time. You referenced that Elmira did lose Waterloo Region Police Office. Do we see any trends as far as that response time going up, down, or staying the same since that?
So it's a little misleading, and that's the average response time across all priorities. So priority 1 call for service would be lights and sirens, the most pressing need, a 911 call, and oftentimes we're there within depending on our availability and the deployment, we could be there within seconds, within minutes. So the departure from that Elmira station has not changed our deployment capacity. We are still deploying largely out of North Division, which is our Waterloo station. But this is a fixed, deployment in the rural townships, spreading a lot of kilometers, but we're not seeing year over year any deficiency or lagging in our response times overall. And that is something we report regularly, quarterly to our police services board. It's public information, and we'd be happy to share the data on that as well. Yeah.
Maybe seeing this is live streamed as well. Maybe you could just elaborate really quickly on what it looks like for a police officer who's patrolling the townships in terms of, where they might be and how they might respond, because it's not like they're sitting at headquarters there waiting to be called.
Not at all. So our deployment model in rural is to be, out and available for calls for service, at the drop of a hat. And so we deploy teams. Oftentimes we have rural officers paired so they can respond to those 2-person calls effectively. There are sometimes 1-person calls where they can manage those one-on-one. And if they're not actively responding to calls for service or doing administrative work reports, they're then working on data-driven enforcement opportunities, especially in rural. So those are just the neighborhood policing officers, coordinated by Staff Sergeant McSween and our community engagement unit, but also supplemented by other neighborhood policing capacity. So those who are not dedicated to the rural areas are always available to respond as emergencies develop in some of our rural townships. And also our regular traffic enforcement teams predominantly are spending their time in the hot spots across the region. And as I highlighted, 60% of our high impact collisions and fatal collisions are happening in rural. That's where we are. So oftentimes you will see different deployments across the region, different small teams and deployments, but we're rarely idle. And oftentimes, the cruiser that you see on the road, the SUV that you see, it is a mobile office. So we're fully capable to respond from that location. And so that's the model that we have right now. One thing we are exploring is the possibility of a mobile police station. So we're looking at global models where it could be, anything from a caravan or van of some kind, which could be allowed to us to stop in a regular engagement point, to touch base with the community, but not be fixed, to one storefront or one community center. And so we're just exploring the cost efficiency and how the community might like that as a model.
Anyone else? David?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to take the opportunity while the chief is here and some of the other representatives to say how I've enjoyed and appreciated the journey that staff have been on working with the police in terms of, again, how we function and collaborate and partner in the spirit of one customer, one taxpayer. Examples of that is, previous to Staff Sergeant McSween, I worked with Inspector Lewis on making sure that whether it was Mr. Smith, our Director of Corporate Services, who oversees bylaw enforcement, or Jared Poupé, who oversees our infrastructure services, that if there's matters of a bylaw enforcement, if there's matters of traffic, speeding, those sorts of things, we're working together to try and solve issues and solve problems. And I think that's, more of what we continue to need is to find ways we collectively solve issues and address issues that happen out in the rural areas. Things aren't done in silos. Things are done through collaborative effort because, as I'm always saying, there's only one customer, there's only one taxpayer, and we should be working on joint efforts in that regard. And that certainly is what I've seen. And I certainly appreciate the increased touch points on a regular basis. As I've said to council, we meet regularly. That's an opportunity for council to bring things forward as you regularly do, or for us at a senior management team level to bring things forward to the police. And again, keep those lines of communication open. So we appreciate that.
Thank you. I do have one more question. And you talked about a digital presence and online sort of cyber crime. So other than that, what's the biggest maybe change or increase in criminal activity across the region, not just in the township, but like what's the biggest change you've seen in the last, I don't know, 5 years?
I think with the growth in the highway access points that we see, stretching all the way to our rural townships, we're seeing organized crime and in all its forms of violence, the increase of weapons on the streets. So the past couple of years, we've seen an increase in all of our metrics of crime severity, weapons offenses, robberies, high-end thefts. And so it's global issues becoming localized. And so oftentimes we're seeing, not to say that there aren't challenges, organized, crime rings happening within our region, from our region. We're also seeing Southern Ontario grapple with the same issues, some of the same prolific offenders and offenses. And so we're seeing that in things like high-end vehicle thefts, the robberies, the proliferation of drugs as well, is allowing just, crimes of opportunity. So everything is becoming, constricted and shrunk. And so we're trying to partner the best we can with our policing and public safety partners all around Southern Ontario, just to get a handle on the highest impact victimization. And so that's the real world on the ground stuff. And then there's the explosion of things happening digitally. And that's, posing challenges. And, as we evolve with technology and adapt, that the world is in flux with us as well. So we're trying to be as smart and as attentive to the highest impact victimization needs, but it's a challenge with the growth that we're facing. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Before I say goodbye, are there any other questions? No? Thank you very much for coming and speaking to us, and we look forward to seeing you again. Really appreciate the stats, the monthly stats that we can share with our constituents and show where your work is.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thanks
Thank you.
to each of you for coming. Okay, this is the point where I'm declaring a conflict of interest, and I'm going to turn the chair over to Councillor Bryant.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. Okay, delegations. We have some delegations this evening. Before we get started with that, excuse me, I'd like to remind the delegates of the guidelines for participating. On this section of the agenda, individual delegations have 7 minutes to speak. After you speak, please wait for questions from council. Once there are no further questions, you may return to your seat or turn off your video. You can leave anytime if you wish, or you are more than welcome to stay for the remainder of the meeting. Excuse me. So we're going to be discussing item 3 of the summary of recommendations to council from October 17th, 2023 Committee of the Whole meeting. George Street, High Street, and Charles Street Reconstruction Project. First, we will hear from Director of Infrastructure Services, Jared Poupé, who has an update to share on this topic. Mr. Poupé.
Thank you, Chair Bryant, and through you to members of council. Staff are just seeking clarity, and I want to apologize from the committee meeting last week. I was not clear on what that recommendation entailed. So I just wanted to bring something to council's attention. I think it's important and just look for clarity on that piece. It's my understanding that council had agreed to not install sidewalk except from Church Street to the Bolander Park entranceway. And council also had recommended to maintain the existing width of road. The challenge I think we have on that stretch of George is by maintaining that existing width of road plus installing the sidewalk, we are going to be into some tree impacts, potentially some hydropole impacts and slope. So what we are seeking, staff are seeking direction on is, would council be considerate of the, I believe it was the 7.9 meter face of curb to face of curb dimension that was presented as a modified cross section to council at the committee meeting last week, with the installation of sidewalk for that stretch of George. That would then allow us to install the sidewalk, the road width, which would permit parking restriction on one side only, as well as 2 travel lanes. So I think that was the important piece as well, that we wanted to ensure travel lanes with parking restriction one side only while facilitating sidewalk. That was the piece that we are seeking clarity on. Or is council going to say, no, we want the full width plus the sidewalk, and then we would just have to adjust grading plans and look at those impacts from a tree perspective on the east side of George.
Thank you, Jared. Council, are there any questions? Mr. Burgess.
For you, Chair, the Director. So just for clarity, you'll be narrowing the road where the sidewalk will be, but on that same stretch of road past Bolander Park, it'll then open right back up.
That is the way we are taking that resolution from council. If that stays, that's exactly what we would propose to do. I would think we would need a bit of grace on where we open it, probably after the intersection of Charles makes most sense, but that's correct.
Can we look to maximize the dimension from curb to curb with sidewalk, or is that kind of maximizing it based on the dimensions you're saying?
Sure. I mean, we can look at what that impact is before removing trees. That's fine. And we'll be talking, I would assume we're talking inches, 4 inches, something like that, 5, but something, if that's council's direction, that would be fine.
Council, do we have any other questions for Mr. Poupey? Seeing none. Okay, then next we have Delegate Robson Jewett. Is Robson here? Hi, you can begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you. I think based on, I'm here today just to represent the interests of High Street. But based on the conversation I heard, may sound a little redundant. Sounds like we've maybe already come to a resolution. I was here last week. I also, just for some clarity, wasn't sure if we still were looking at potentially putting in sidewalks. So if that is off the table, then I can just pass. But if you would like to hear, I'd be happy to share.
That's up to you, whether you want to present or not. Okay.
At the end of the day, I think if we move beyond the sidewalks and we can agree that they are not, except for on George, I'm satisfied.
Thank you then. Jared, we are not doing sidewalks except on the streets he mentioned. Is that correct? Just to clarify for him.
I like the Zoom and in-person piece too. It's complicated. So the direction that I now understand from council from last week was no sidewalks on George, High and Charles, save and except the stretch from Church Street to Bolander Park on the west side. That'll be curb face sidewalk. The road widths are to remain as is, which is around the 8.4-ish meters. Save and except the piece we just spoke about between George and Bolander Park, so we can facilitate sidewalk without having significant tree impacts on the east side. That's what we're looking at. So that's the direction that I understand from council.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Any questions of the delegate? Obviously, I'm not seeing any. Okay, the next we have Delegate Colleen Willard Holt, who's joining us via Zoom. Can't even talk tonight. Is Colleen there? Okay, thank you. Colleen, whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Bryant and members of council for listening to the residents' concerns. As with Rob, I don't think that I need to speak at length, but I did want to bring up one concern that came to our attention after the meeting last week, and it has to do with the accessibility issue. We have a serious concern with accessibility related to the steep slope on the top part of George Street, and there's also quite a slope on both High and Charles Street moving toward the east. So I just wanted to point that out, that those particular slopes would be of concern for a person in a wheelchair to navigate. And with that, I will just say thank you again for allowing us to present our concerns.
Thank you. Council, do you have any questions for Colleen Holt? No, seeing none. Okay, well, thank you, delegates, for taking time to speak with us tonight. Council, do we have any further discussion or questions for staff? Seeing none. Okay, before you is a recommendation that the Council of the Township of Woolwich, considering report IS 22-2023 respecting George Street, High Street and Charles Street reconstruction project design approval report, direct staff to modify the design to remove sidewalks except on George Street between Church Street and the entrance to Bolander Park, and maintain the existing road widths. Do I have a mover for this recommendation? Councillor Burgess, do I have a seconder? Councillor Swint. All those in favor? Opposed? That's a tie vote. I have to break the tie. I am going with in favor. Okay, so that would be that one. Do we need to find our mayor? Bring her back in.
I think we're unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business? No. Seeing none, we have one item for approval and one for information on the consent items. Before we pass a motion approving and receiving the consent agenda for information, does anyone want to remove anything? No, would someone like to move and second? Councillor Bryant, Councillor Grant, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Staff reports and memos. We have Fire Chief Dennis Aldos to talk to us about a heavy rescue fire apparatus vehicle purchase for Conestogo. Chief, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, in the report, we're recommending that the township consider purchasing a new heavy rescue for our Conestoga station. Given the pre-budget approval for $1,169,862.46 net HST rebate for the purchase of a new KME heavy rescue fire apparatus from Metz Fire and Rescue to be delivered and paid for in the 2026 budget year. A bit of background, the purchase of the Conestoga Heavy Rescue was deferred in the 2021 capital budget replacement schedule to be purchased in 2023, which put the purchase over the 20-year vehicle replacement program established by council. The Conestoga Fire Station currently operates with a pumper tanker, heavy rescue, and a pickup truck. The new heavy rescue will replace the current heavy rescue and the pickup truck. When we go forward and when we're looking at purchasing new vehicles, there's a fire truck committee made up of representatives from the township's 4-6 stations that developed the specification for the new truck. So this is what happened with the heavy rescue vehicle, and it addresses the needs of the Conestoga Fire Station in the short term and long term. The recommended purchase vehicle is a KME Severe Service Heavy Rescue truck. And with this truck, it accommodates storage for bunker gear, water rescue equipment, and auto extrication equipment. And this truck will replace the current heavy rescue and the pickup truck that's in the fire hall. The fire department vehicle specifications are reviewed at every purchase. And what we try to make sure we do is we meet all the current standards for Transportation Canada, underwriters, Laboratories of Canada, and the National Fire Protection Association standards. So it's a bit of a background on it. Knowing that the heavy rescue equipment has skyrocketed price over the last few years, staff looked to leverage the township's purchasing power and use a procurement group called Sourcewell Canoe. Sourcewell Canoe is one of the largest cooperative purchasing groups in the country, and they provide a streamlined procurement process that is permitted under the township's current purchasing bylaw, while offering an economy of scale that would not be available under a typical township request for quotation process. So while the township would normally undertake an RFP process, for this type of a purchase, utilizing the cooperative purchasing group has allowed staff to directly engage in discussions with the vendor, which allows both sides to understand the exact magnitude of the purchase. In part for the increase of the pricing is due to the manufacturer's increase of approximately 12%. And the motor of choice for the fire service, the Cummins L9 diesel motor, has been eliminated, and they're replacing it with a more expensive X12 model. The expected delivery date of the rescue is 28 to 36 months from the date of ordering. That's why we can do pre-budget approval out so far. So in the financial impacts, it outlines the cost of the truck with HST rebates. And council is aware that the funding available in the equipment reserve fund is a concern for staff, given the significant price escalation of our fleet replacement. Staff will be processing a significant increase annual contributions to the equipment reserve fund to help fund the price increases. However, we may need to borrow funds if the reserve fund balance is insufficient. New for 2023 is the fire truck manufacturers are offering an option. Some have it an option, some have it as a requirement, as a put down a deposit at the time of ordering in return. There's a discount applied. Currently, our KME is just doing it as an option. It's not a requirement. But they're offering the discounts that you can see in front of you. Staff is not recommending that we take advantage of this option due to the interest income we currently earn will more than offset the discount being offered. The 2021 Freightliner Heavy Rescue and the pickup will be declared surplus and committed to auction when the fire department receives the new vehicle from Met's. Funds from this sale will be deposited back into our heavy equipment replacement fund. So in conclusion, that staff recommends the council support the purchase of the heavy rescue for the Conestogo Fire Station from Met's Fire and Rescue at a total of $1,169,862 after HST rebate, to be delivered within 28 to 36 months from receipt of the order.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. Through you to the chief. How much do we anticipate getting for the old vehicle when we sell it? Do we have any idea what they're worth?
Through Mayor to Councillor Bryant, I have no idea. I have no idea. Some of the reports are saying that fire departments, depending on the vehicle, are just getting whatever the scrap value is for the truck. So in the past, we have been able to sell some at, I'll say market value, what you would get. If you look online, you can probably see them in the $20,000 to $30,000 range. That's about what we'd expect to get.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Burgess and then Councillor Schwint.
Through you, Chair, to the chief and possibly Director Patrick. You mentioned there that we may not have sufficient funds in the reserve and may need to get it from elsewhere. What are we foreseeing in the coming years for other vehicles we'll need? Do we need to be putting more towards that fund? Or what are our options going forward if we're already depleting that fully?
Through Mayor to Councillor Burgess, on some part of that I can answer. Some of it will have to rely on Mr. Petrich. So going forward is in 2024 budget, there is a couple of vehicles that are in there, but there again, there'll be years till we get them. So you look at the 28 to 36 month mark. I know, and Mr. Petrich could speak better to it, we are looking at making larger contributions to that fund. As to the deficit, I'd leave that to Mr. Petrich to answer.
Mr. Patrick. Okay.
Thank you so much.
So through Madam Mayor, I think the challenge that we're going to have, while we are going to be significantly increasing the contributions to the Equipment Reserve Fund, we do have some of these, and I would say it's more so in the fire department that we're seeing some very significant cost increases. We do see cost increases along our pickup trucks, but I mean, obviously while they do have a pretty big magnitude of a cost increase, it's not to this because we're not talking about millions of dollars for a pickup truck. So I think the challenge is we have a number of fire vehicles, I think that the chief mentioned that are coming up for replacement. I think there's another rescue pumper. We got some aerials that are coming up. And I think we're going to have to try to do a balancing act to try to push it so we don't have to borrow. I think what I wanted to make sure was in this report was the fact that by the time we get to 2026, we may have to, depending on how our equipment is faring. But the whole point for us is to try to not borrow and to try to continue to increase the contributions to that reserve fund, because we're going to need to make sure that we are going to be sustained as we start to replace some of our remaining vehicles within the fire department. And then as we get to replacing the ones that we're replacing now, we want to make sure we don't run into the same issue.
Councillor Cadeau.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to the chief. A lot of the discussion around the purchases stem from legislation. We're required by legislation to purchase vehicles after they reach their expiration date. I'm wondering if we have a fair number of vehicles coming due in the interim. Could we be looking at more of a regional system of our fire stations, even so that we don't have to replace the vehicles to say 6 stations as often if we had, 3 larger stations? Do you know what I mean? And I'm just kind of throwing it out there for discussion, because I think that if we're trying to identify costs that we can cut, having to replace vehicles in 6 stations is going to be more expensive than replacing in 5, for example.
It's kind of an interesting question, so it's not one I was quite prepared for. So
Maybe I can add, is there any legislation that would mandate that we keep the coverage that we currently have now?
So through Madam Mayor to Councillor Cadeau, one of the driving forces behind our replacement of our trucks at the maximum that NFP allows is at 20 years is due to the fire underwriter's assessment for insurance within Canada. Right now, Woolwich is at the best level we can be at with our certified tanker shuttle, because we have if you're within 8 kilometers of one of our fire halls, you get your insurance is prorated to as if you had hydrant coverages. And it's the same for within 5 kilometers if you're a commercial operation. So by keeping us in that range, that helps keep our insurance rates down as the best we can have. So it's a cost benefit to our residents. The longer we push out trucks, the more expensive it gets to repair them. I see that all the time now with the ones that we do have. They're 20 years old and getting close up. We have some trucks that the manufacturers are no longer even around, so to get parts for them are very, 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 very difficult. To replace a windshield in Elmira's pumper, it was around $3,000 to $4,000 just to get the piece of glass made before it can even get put in. So it's somewhere along the lines, the repairs outweigh the cost of keeping the truck going. So
Response time would play into that question as well.
yeah, your first one it would be, but it would also affect our insurance coverage. So
Councillor Grant. Sorry, did I miss Councillor Schwint? Sorry. I think, yeah. Go ahead, Councillor Schwint.
Thanks. I guess I wanted to follow up on the maintenance costs, and can you, I guess, let us know how that Conestogo truck is as far as maintenance last year, 2 years, what's performing well, what isn't? Trying to get an order of magnitude. $4,000 is a lot of money for a windshield, but as far as interest on a $1.1 million truck, it isn't very much all of a sudden. So could we have some understanding on what the maintenance bills are like and what they are projected to be?
through Madam Mayor to Councillor Swint. I'm not 100% what their maintenance bills were last year, but I know they're all on the rise up. When we were talking with the gentleman who maintains all their trucks for them, he was saying that it's within its life expectancy. We could probably get a few more, we'll get a few more years out of it, but maybe not a lot, because the parts and stuff are just getting outrageous to get. So that, I mean, I guess it's an option, but also too, the prices of trucks are going up so much right now that 12% in 1 year, when we go forwards, so that value we have now in January could probably, you can add another 12% onto that. So it starts to get higher and higher and higher. So the replacement of it's just going to get worse.
I'm trying to understand that tipping point in terms of replacement costs going up faster like they have been. And maintenance costs going up. At the same time, we're seeing signs that vehicle prices are peaking and starting to decrease. We're getting 0% financing on vehicles, for example, instead of 5%. So next year, the year after may be different than this year. That's what I'm wrestling with.
Yeah, through Madam Mayor to Councillor Swett, the unfortunate part is the 0% financing, 5% financing, which you're talking about is basically in like your pickup trucks, your personal vehicles. But the bigger trucks like this, they're not offering any incentives like that, so.
Okay, Councillor Grant.
Thank you through you. I think this might be a Richard question. But just speaking about the pricing, I was wondering if we have any idea if fire truck prices will be plateauing or if we're going to see a steady increase. And if that's the case, are we taking that into account when we look at increasing our contributions to that reserve fund?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. I think what we started here, and I know in conversations I've had with the chief, is that we are still continuing to see significant increases within our, especially the fire fleet perspective. And that's from a variety of things. And I think really one of the big things is that these trucks are coming out of the States. So we still have a, we're subject to what's going to happen from an exchange rate perspective. I think as the chief alluded to that, some of the motors we otherwise would have had, they're not available. So therefore the increases in motors, I think I've heard it in amongst $200,000 just by having a different motor. So I think in the foreseeable future, we still see that there are significant cost increases. I think to Councillor Schwin's perspective, where is that plateau? Is it 2024? Is it 2025, 2026? I really don't know that. I can't say that I have that much intimate detail. But what I can say, I think, Councillor Grant, to answer some of your questions about, are we putting enough, or at least I'm going to conjecture this is where you may have been going. Are we putting enough money in our reserve funds? I think we are trying to add as much as we can, but not really overdo it. I think we're trying to phase it in as we go. I think that is the best thing. We are going to be seeing some significant increases in the 24 budget, but it's not necessarily where we should be going. I think it's just that affordability balance perspective is what we're trying to do from a staff perspective.
Thank you. And then just a follow-up question. I'm just wondering if it'd be possible for us to get a report of maybe what vehicles or the number of vehicles that we're maybe seeing coming up to that range. So we have a general idea of, are we talking 5 vehicles? Are we talking 12 or 15, that we kind of have like a capital forecast for when those might be coming up and we might be seeing those expenses?
Through Mayor to Councillor Grant, in our forecast for our 2024 budget, it shows the next ones that are up within the next 3 to 4 years. We can put together as part of that budget package, the forecast going out for the next 10 years, if you like. I mean, it's not that hard for us to put it, just we can't put dollar values with them. But currently I know, speaking to different salesmen for fire trucks that keep calling me all the time, we're looking at a minimum of a 10 to 15% increase annually for the next number of years. So
I think, if I may be so bold to direct council, I think 10 years would make sense, considering we're doing the official plan review as well, to just have a general sense of what the inventory of fire trucks are that we have and the possible replacements we may need down the road.
Is that something you would look for during budget? Or are you looking for it sooner than that?
I think I'd be fine with budget. As Chief Elder said, I don't necessarily, I think it'd be just an accounting of how many vehicles are at what age. But I don't necessarily think it's information we need ASAP either. So.
All right, anything else? We've got a recommendation here. Is someone willing to move the recommendation? Councillor Grant, seconded by Councillor Cadeau. All those in favor? Is there discussion? Yeah. Any discussion? Councillor Schwint.
I'll admit I'm struggling with this one just because of the huge increase in costs and magnitude, and wondering if we can work on our depreciation costs by extending life by 1 or 2 years on each truck. What is the ramifications if we delay this by another year? After being delayed 1 year or 2 years, I understand. But have staff evaluated that and done a cost benefit in both scenarios?
If I may just tack on to Councillor Schwintz's question, what is the current age of the vehicle? Because I know we are mandated at a certain age to replace it.
Through Mayor to Councillor Grant, it was a 2001, because we were replaced in 2021. And then it is, remember, a 28 to 36 month build date, so you're already pushing the truck out potentially 3 more years till we get it, so it's adding on to it as we're going.
What happens when a truck needs repair in terms of operation of the department?
Madam Mayor, depending on what it is, it goes out of service for the time frame that it needs to be done. If it's a minor, like passing our safeties and getting work done, it could just be a day. Depending on what it is, it may have to go back in for 2 or 3 days. If it's something major, it could be out. If it's a part that we can't get. So our brand new truck that we picked up for St. Jacobs this year, we lost for about 6 weeks because a computer went on it and we couldn't get one. And that was a brand new truck, so.
So by the time this one gets replaced, it'll be 25 years old. If I did the math right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Cadeau and then Councillor Bryant.
Thanks, Mayor. Through you, this is more generally to council. I would suggest that if we were to defer this by a year, any potential savings that we would make by squeezing out that extra year would be eaten up by the cost of inflation or the added expenses, as we heard from the chief. So I don't know that that makes the most sense. I'm struggling as or Councillor Schwint is as well with this, but the fact is we're legislated to do this, and pushing it out beyond what we're legislated to do already is somewhat troublesome. So I'm hesitant to continue to kind of push the envelope.
Councillor Bryant.
Through you to the chief. Do we have our own in-house mechanics or we have to send these trucks out to be repaired?
Through Madam Mayor to Councillor Bryant, they go out to get repaired at diesel shops within the coverage area of the 6 stations. So we use Tours just outside of Elmira. They do Floridale and Elmira's. Goods Garage does Conestoga's and St. Jacobs. And we just got a new one out on Victoria Street that does Mary Hills and Breslau. So.
Thank you.
Anything else before I call the question? Okay, all those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you, Council. Next, Manager of Planning Jeremy Vink is going to present a zone change application for 76 Howard Ave. Mr. Vink, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. So this is the application zone change 9/2023 for 76 Howard Avenue, the Elmira Photo Lab. The property is located as noted on 76 Howard and is currently zoned general dry industrial M2 with site specific provisions. The site-specific provisions allow the use on the property to include data service operation, freestanding non-accessory office, research and development facilities, studio, and a theater for the performing arts. The property currently has 2 multi-tenanted buildings on it. The applicant has asked to amend the site-specific zoning to add a wellness and training center as a permitted use on the property. Staff have reviewed the application and in accordance with the PPS provincial policy statement, the regional official plan, and the township official plan. The key element here that in reviewing all these documents is that we want to ensure that the general industrial lands, the predominant use of these lands remains industrial, and that the function of the employment lands remain that long-term economic viability as a result of any applications in the area. So introducing a commercial use within an industrial area can start to undermine the industrial area over time. So we don't want to see a lot of commercial uses that would detract from the employment uses. However, in this case, we already have a number of commercialized uses that are in this permitted in the site specific. Adding this additional use will not further create any additional issues in the area, nor further undermine the industrial land uses in the area. So staff is satisfied that the application is consistent with provincial policy statement, place to grow, the regional official plan, and the township's official plan. With respect to the zoning bylaw itself, the applicant did propose their own wording and definition for a commercial wellness facility. However, the staff has always used the definition in our current zoning bylaw of commercial recreation use. Rather than introducing a new use and a new definition to the bylaw, staff is satisfied that the definition and terminology of commercial recreation is sufficient and would actually provide the appropriate land use that they're proposing on the site within the structure. As a result, staff has in front of you the recommendation to approve the zone change amendment to add the commercial recreation use on the property and to move forward with the amending zoning bylaw accordingly. If there's any questions, staff can answer them tonight, and the applicant is also here waiting patiently.
Thank you for your patience. Are there any questions? No, I don't see any. Would someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Cadeau, Councillor Grant, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. You're welcome to stay. I know the gallery's getting really thin by now, but okay, thanks for staying. Next is I'll call on CAO David Brenneman to speak about the former Riverside school site.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you to council. Just wanted to give an update to this council on the latest in terms of talking with board staff about where they're at with the former Riverside public school site in the town of Elmira. I would say that the closure of the old school and the opening of the new school was in 2016. So I was reflecting recently on the fact that this is technically the third term of council where we're giving an update or discussing matters. I can advise this council that with the closure, staff did immediately approach board staff because we were certainly interested in what their process was going to be and timing around potentially declaring the property and the land surplus to its needs. Full disclosure, at the time, that was because certainly there had been an interest in the potential for satellite post-secondary campuses. At the time, that was one prevailing thinking around the council table. But however, over time, as you can appreciate, with the crisis around affordable and supportive housing, there certainly has been that interest and focus and discussion amongst many council members over the course of the last 7 years. Over the course of the last 7 years at various strategic points, we have continued to connect with board staff about the timing and moving forward. I would say prior to the pandemic, the consistent messaging from board staff was with respect to the staff that they were still holding on to the school because they felt potentially they were going to need that school as a functioning school. There was the potential for that. Then along came the pandemic and what happened there because of, I guess, gaining capacity and spacing at existing school sites that had to be created. Riverside was used as a storage building throughout the pandemic. I had the opportunity when the new superintendent of business services took over his position approximately 8 months ago to engage on what his thinking and the board's current thinking. I was advised at that time that the plan was to make sure that all equipment was emptied out of the school by September. And that hopefully what would happen then as well is some sort of board report would go before the school board this fall with respect to any recommendation regarding declaring the property surplus to the needs of the school board. Recent update this month is there is still some storage in and equipment in that building. And it's uncertain whether a board report will be tabled, a staff report will be tabled to the board before the end of the year. I was told that it may be more likely early next year or the spring of next year. To which, I advised the board staff person that was concerning because it's been 7 years. And this, from a planning and development standpoint, when we look at our official plan and our zoning bylaw and look at, the growth of our area, you're always trying to look at potential great parcels of land that certainly could be available. Now I should mention for council's benefit and also the viewing public, the board, we do appreciate, does have to go through a different process than we do in terms of disposing of surplus land. They have to go through a protocol in terms of where they offer up the property. And, certainly what I've expressed to the board staff person is, we'd like an opportunity to continue the dialogue around the need for more affordable housing, strategic housing. Parcels of land. Certainly the province themselves have emphasized the importance of the need for, I would say any of the MUSH sector, municipalities, universities, school boards, hospitals, any of the lands that would be available to be able to offer up for opportunities. And certainly what I wanted to do this evening, as I said, was give yet this third council an update on where things are at 7 years later. And also just mention that, unless I hear differently, certainly at a staff level, we'll continue to ramp up the pressure at the earliest available opportunity, preferably to declare the land surplus to their needs so that something can be done with those lands. And at the very least, then, once we know that the board is in that position, this council could potentially entertain whether it wants to be in the mix. As I said, informally to date, we wanted to express an interest at a staff level. As I said, back 7 or 8 years ago, we did that again, so that the board knew that we were interested. And at the time, it was hopeful that they would understand it was a priority, but it wasn't a priority for the reasons I have articulated before. But now certainly there is a need for such parcels of land. And by putting continued pressure on the board staff to bring a report forward, that would give this council a future opportunity to have a strategic discussion about whether we continued at a political level to have an interest in acquiring potentially this piece of property. With that, I'd be happy to try and answer any questions the council may have.
Okay, questions, comments, Councillor Cadeau?
Thanks, through you, Mayor. Not really a question, more a comment. Thanks for the update. I wish it was better news. I think that the residents of Elmira have been very patient with the old Riverside property in watching it continue to degrade and become derelict. Not really fun to watch, you know, from my perspective, representing the people of Elmira. So I thank you for continuing to have that dialogue with the school board. To council, I'm scratching my head wondering, you know, how we can really help to push this envelope along. So I guess what I would request of staff is maybe put pen to paper and start to draft a motion that would urge the school board to divest of this property, open it up so that we can consider what this land could be used for the betterment of our community.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Grant.
Thank you. Through you, also more comment than a question, which is a dreaded statement for any academic, but I had the opportunity today to attend a planning learning session. And one of the things that was really stressed was the fact that land is a limited commodity and it's also valuable. And the placement of the former Riverside School in Elmira just kind of drives home that point that is valuable land that could be used for much better purposes, whether, as Mr. Brenneman said, about a satellite campus or accessible housing. Right now it's sitting and not doing anything, which isn't really providing any value to the community. So I would also echo Councillor Trudeau's kind of push that we need to do some advocacy with the school board to kind of declare that as a surplus land.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I hear, I think I hear support around the table, strong support to continue the advocacy and work with the school board to find a way to make best use of that property. Thank you. Other business. There's a till death do us part motion that has received first and second reading by the Legislative Assembly of Ontario and has been referred to the Standing Committee on Social Policy on November, that was back on November 15th, 2022. MPP for Waterloo, Catherine Fife had had talked to me, had contacted me and wondered if we could support that. So there's a motion here. If I could get a mover, Councillor Cadeau, seconded by Councillor Grant. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor? Thank you. And we'll put that together and forward it to the appropriate people. Mayor's report on regional matters. I guess a couple of things at the region, the region's meeting with the West Montrose Bridge Keepers. We're still working on what the composition of the repairs to the West Montrose Bridge would be and how we can keep it at best as a heritage bridge and still maintain the integrity and allow traffic and buggies and people to use it. So that's an ongoing project that we're hoping to, I'm not going to say bring an end to, but bring to fruition soon. And the other thing I was going to turn over to Mr. Brenneman again is just a bit of a comment on ROPA 6, the changes that have gone on through a period of time, but the most recent change this week. So if you want to speak to that for a moment.
Sure, happy to, Madam Mayor, through you to council, I guess for the public's benefit, because I think sometimes it's hard, I'm sure, for the public to follow and appreciate some of the decisions, you know, that are made and then unmade coming out of Queen's Park lately. The reality is that here's what we know right now. Further to Minister Calander's announcement, there is going to be some sort of review of the regional official plan decisions that have been made recently across the province. especially honing in on the fact that significant lands have been added in places like Waterloo region, Hamilton, Ottawa, et cetera, which were far and above what the requests were from the local region and area municipalities in terms of what their asks were. What this actually means right now, I think we're still trying to evaluate. I would say this, obviously there's a 45-day review period, always a short window in terms of providing comment. Certainly in speaking with Deanne Freese, our Director of Development Services, we've talked about how important it will be for the planning heads to speak together, both at a region, city and township level, to talk about how best to handle this in terms of making appropriate submissions to the province. Would it be one? Would it be a multiple submissions, i.e. the region and the individual area municipalities? How best to collaborate, coordinate, or make a submission? At the end of the day, I would be remiss if I didn't note that, as you can appreciate, there's already been considerable staff time, effort, consulting costs in terms of moving forward, in terms of trying to plan out the acres that were approved by the province and the regional official plan, along with Mr. Poupé's team and consultants in terms of working out the servicing plan and infrastructure for that area. I'd like to think that regardless of the outcome of whatever the review will come forward, certainly somebody will benefit in the future. Since these lands were all within the countryside line from the work, we may still benefit from that. We'll have to see what comes out of the review. But ultimately, I think what's important here is that we perhaps use this opportunity to reinforce, I think something that's been long an important part of Woolwich Township's vision, and that is to stay focused around managed, stage, phased growth in whatever the outcome comes out of the review, because ultimately that's the best way to not only plan for the future, but also not go through any boom bust periods with respect to servicing capacity. And also, for that matter, not to put an undue burden on this council and decisions you have to make in terms of the level of services and programs with respect to the population that comes on with significant, fast, rapid growth that may occur. So lastly, I would just say, we live in very interesting, challenging times. Certainly with discussions around the Greenbelt, now with respect to ROPA 6. And I also would just remark that Bill 23 is still technically in limbo, which means that it has yet to be officially proclaimed, i.e. if you recall, the significant thing was that was moving the region officially more out of the planning side of things and delegating responsibilities down to the area municipalities. What is happening there is also a question mark that we would like greater clarity on. Again, you can appreciate planning is about long-term strategic thinking and focusing on the future and how it should best be planned. And we do that in the best interest of the communities that we serve. And so certainly I hope at some point we will provide a better clarity and certainty around the planning parameters for the future, because that is important for our staff and the community and this council to be able to properly plan for the future.
Thank you. Any questions for David on that? Okay. Any members of council have anything to report? Councillor Schwinn.
I don't know if this is reporting or other business. I think this council, we should have conversation follow up in last week's meeting on what our plan is for the greening fund and the climate emergency and how we can best address it. I think we made a conscious decision last week that hiring a full-time person to coordinate it wasn't something we were comfortable with at that time, but we didn't have the conversation about what will we be prepared to do or fund going forward. And we need to start that process sometime. We're building up that green fund. I know I heard from many residents this week that they want us to see us do something. I want to also state that I heard residents tell me they want us to spend that money effectively, not just spend it for the sake of spending it. So I'm not sure when to have that conversation, but I know I'd like to throw out the idea that now would be a great time to direct senior staff when they're doing their budgeting and work plans. Part of that has to be give us 2, 3, 4 ideas on green initiatives in your department. If that can be brought forward as a report over the next month or two, we could see those ideas, have them vetted maybe by tweak or another township body. And then during the budget process, we as council can say yay or nay to some, a few, no projects, whatever's appropriate, but take concrete steps. And part of that may or probably will need money to write grant proposals and administer those projects. And we can build that into the budget at the time. So I just wanted to throw that out there as a starting point for council to consider. But I really think we need to have a conversation about what next steps we will take.
So I guess that you're wishing to, we did ask staff to bring back some reports on the sustainability position or at budget, but you're thinking we should have that conversation separate from budget or prior to budget?
I would love to see some concrete projects brought forward by staff in a list before budget, so that we could have a better conversation and get them underway in 2024.
Okay, I'll turn to Mr. Brenneman. Is that something that can happen?
Well, I guess first, I mean, we always like senior staff to know whether that's the consensus of council, because right now Councillor Schwinch is raising that. I guess to assist in council's discussion, well, I appreciate where Councillor Schwindt is going with his suggestion. You know, we have had the opportunity to reflect ourselves as senior management post the last discussion, and you know, I would I guess reflect on the fact that what Councillor Schwindt is, I believe, articulating is similar to what we've done over the last few years, which is we've done our best through recreation and community services, because one thing, you know, I've talked with senior management, we don't have the expertise in all the departments to bring forward ideas from each of the departments. That's one of the difficulties in terms of expertise and for that matter, capacity. And, you know, the only thing I would also reflect upon, you know, that we spoke about last week and Ms. MacArthur presented is I think we also have to have more of a discussion between council and staff about the realities around. I appreciate the commitment that was made by a previous council, but you know, a previous council on behalf of the township committed to 80 by 50 and 50 by 30. Our historic way of addressing the use of the greening levy will not get us to a 50% reduction by 2030. It's the implementation of the Transform Waterloo Region strategy that ultimately has to get implemented. And we don't, you know, and senior staff is prepared to speak to that tonight if, you know, we were getting prepared for budget, but I know senior staff would be prepared to speak to that on all fronts. Again, we don't currently have the capacity or the expertise, as we said last week, to do anything more than maybe the suggestions that have been brought forth on an annual budget with respect to tree planting or some improvements with respect to lighting and things of that nature. But they in themselves are not going to make the transformations necessary to reach 50% reduction by 2030. There are some aggressive plans of those 45 recommendations. So certainly, I appreciate what Councillor Schwinn has brought forward. I would suggest we would already be doing that normally as part of the regular budget process for council's benefit. But I still think, you know, you know, what we reflected on is It got defeated by a tie vote, which ultimately means there's half of council in support of moving forward in a certain direction and half of council isn't. And I think further to Councillor Burgess's comment, the direction was, and the consensus of council was to bring the position back as part of the budget. So that this council could have a fulsome discussion at budget time around whether there was support, considering all of the priorities as part of that. As senior staff, we reflected upon that this week. We would love that opportunity to do that. And as I would say in summary, just to Councillor Schwint's suggestion, I feel we're already going to do some of that within the realm. I have to stress enough. I heard this loud and clear from senior staff. If there is more expected on the climate change file, then we'll have to come back with what drops off the work programs in some of the departments, because I can't emphasize enough that senior staff, was clear in our discussions that the capacity and the expertise does not exist in-house. And that is clear, for example, even from Recreation Community Services staff who are meeting right now, as you know, with Envira stewards and Simcoe to look at some of our building assessment and audits. And when staff sit in on those meetings, it's clear the expertise and the professional knowledge that exists in the room. Our staff, while they appreciate the work that they're doing, we don't have that level of knowledge that they do. I think the only other course ultimately that we may want to discuss during budget time is to, look at alternatives like engaging with Envira stewards to actually be our quasi staffing support, if you will, because they have that professionalism and the expertise. But we're passionate definitely about this file, simply because we know from the community, or at least, some members of the community, that in order to actually effectively implement the resolution that the previous council passed, declaring a climate crisis, and the 80 by 50 and the 50 by 30, it cannot be done any longer off the side of people's desks. It's just impossible to do that without us coming back as staff with changes to the work program and the priorities that we would have to. And even with that, we would have to recommend getting outside expertise from Envira stewards or some company like that. So in summary, hopefully council would still stay online with what Councillor Burgess had suggested, and we believe council supported, which is to have another discussion about the sustainability position during the budget time. And we're happy to implement Councillor Schwint's discussion as part of the budget, as we normally would, within the parameters of what we've normally done through Recreation and Community Services, in terms of bringing other suggestions on a low-level basis that are able to be done with existing expertise and capacity around tree planting, light modifications, and things of that nature, if that helps.
So I think what I've heard from all of that is that during the budget process in January, we will be able to see a list of projects that would be considered greening or sustainable, that would be funded from the Climate Action Reserve, that we would see some kind of a report or outline of what a consultant might be able to do for us in bringing things together, and then also the sustainability position and what that might look like, so that we can have that discussion with those three pieces all in front of us. Is that fair?
Yeah, but again, as I've always said, it's up to the will of council. Councillor Schwint has made a suggestion to you. I think you need to consider that. Obviously, all of council may have done some reflection since the last week. Senior management always uses our weekly opportunities to reflect on some things, and really we were saving a lot of this to bring up as part of the council budget process, but since we're discussing it here tonight, I thought it would use it as the opportunity. simply because, again, staff, staff are burning on all cylinders in terms of delivering our infrastructure projects. Are right now, we're in the midst of trying to finalize the operating and the capital budgets, the corporate business plan. So, certainly we're all mindful as senior staff of trying to balance the realities of bringing forward our existing priorities at the same time balancing other workload.
So council, does that meet your objectives, including you, Councillor Schwint, if staff brings those projects back? I guess we can have a bit of a discussion tonight, is what Mr. Brenneman said on what projects are available, but then bring the rest back at budget. Councillor Cadeau.
Thanks, Mayor. Through you, maybe I can offer some thoughts on what was proposed by Councillor Schwint. I had been reflecting on this, and I'm not sure that I can offer much more than what CAO Brenneman has reflected on, but I have collected my thoughts on this suggestion. I've kind of contrasted versus the sustainability coordinator that we debated last week, and some of the gaps that I found in the proposal that has been put forward is that it could lead to some potential duplication, without that overarching strategy or coordination. Different departments may propose overlapping initiatives, which could lead to some redundancy throughout this process. This could also strain the departments. We know that they're busy with the new redevelopment of the boundaries. I know planning staff is going to be quite busy over the next 45 days at least. So, expecting each department to come up with 2 or 3 or 5 initiatives, it's going to strain the resources. I like to refer to the triple constraint. You can choose any 2 out of these 3. So you can choose time, scope, or quality, but you can't have all 3. You can choose 2, but not 3. And I think that's what our departments are up against. So, adding on additional responsibilities off the side of their desk is going to create a problem in one of those areas. CAO Brenneman did mention the assumption that we have the level of expertise that we really need to be able to list possible initiatives. Some departments may lack that specific knowledge or experience to propose meaningful green initiatives. And to that point, my concern might be that we have an overemphasis on quantity, not necessarily quality. I think that I would rather see the attention be paid to initiatives that are really going to move the envelope rather than some of the low-hanging fruit, so to speak. So that would be one of my concerns. I think that going forward with this, we certainly could have some missed opportunities for external funding. This plan, as proposed, seems very internally focused. Are we going to continue to leave federal and provincial funding on the table by proposing something like this? I think most of all, though, this is really lacking a long-term vision. It's emphasizing some short-term actions. It's minimizing overhead, yes, but my main criticism is it's unlikely to address any long-term sustainability. It certainly won't integrate green initiatives into our core functions. We heard a proposal last week that may have helped to address some of this, may have helped to address some of the concerns that we've heard even tonight. Councillor Schwint, you had suggested that the sustainability coordinator was akin to putting a bucket of water on a burning house. And I just don't see how this is all that different. So maybe you can, shed some light on the rationale for proposing something like this rather than going with the staff recommendation last week.
Councillor Schwint.
Yes, sure. You make some really good points, Councillor Cadeau, and for sure, this doesn't make a long-term vision for the township. Fully concede that point. It's a short-term starting point, and that was my goal, is to start on that low-hanging fruit. I would challenge staff to go a little bit further than planting trees and changing lights. It's, for example, the planning department looking at, are there ways we can encourage more energy efficient buildings for new developments, but think outside the box on that. And I see this as a 1-year stopgap to start projects, help us understand what's possible, see what other municipalities are doing, and then build on successes. And if it means hiring that coordinator a year from now and we fine tune the job description, I'll be a lot more comfortable than full speed ahead right now.
Counselor Grant.
Thank you. Through you to the rest of council. I really fear when we talk about stopgap measures, we're just kicking the can down the road. I know last year this position came up and we discussed it and we deferred it for a year. And I just worry that this year in January or next year in January, when we discuss budget, it'll be another deferral. We'll just see kind of a lack of progress in this agenda.
Anyone else?
No. The only other thing I think, ultimately council should use some time to reflect upon is, something else we've talked to the senior staff level is that the longer that we do, stay on, and I appreciate Councillor Schwint, you clarifying, what you were thinking. But the longer we stay on that type of course, one of the concerns we have is at some point, somebody from the community is going to say, but how are you going to meet the council commitment? And I appreciate it wasn't this council, but the council commitment to a significant, I can't emphasize enough, 50% reduction by 2030 is a significant task that this council, at some point, you may have to revisit as a council, whether you're prepared to continue with that commitment or you have to back off that commitment and revise that commitment, recognizing that I'm sure you'll have some of the same people that were advocating for support for that back at in front of you as delegates to emphasize, the concern around that. And, I certainly appreciate after last night's discussion that in many ways, council's vote was not unlike at times the community discussions that can happen around the issue around climate change. I'm just going to state that, for the record, because we do appreciate discussions around climate change, whether they be at a federal, provincial, or even a community level. There are sometimes very polar opposite opinions on the level of work and action and commitment that needs to be done. And again, all I'm trying to do tonight is to reflect on the fact that, but now with the clarity from Councillor Schwint, we are doing similar work to that. But as senior staff, we just don't feel that's going to get us to meeting the commitment of the 50% reduction by 2030. There has to be, I think Councillor McMillan in the last term of council at the time when the vote was happening said, we need to know what this means. It means that we're going to have to put sufficient staff and financial resources towards this if we're going to stay committed to this. And, I think at times this council over this term has even had the discussion around, when you pass motions, you want to make sure that they are motions that have some substance behind them, to be able to make sure that we're able to deliver on that commitment. And I think that's what we need to reflect upon as we head into the 2024 budget process. How do we best move the needle forward on the original commitment? And if not, as I just said, are you looking then to revise that commitment? Because it's something that we'll have to discuss through, in terms of the ability to meet those targets.
Councillor Bryant.
Just a comment, excuse me, can we get that list of commitments so that as a council, we can go through them ourselves and take a look and see what we feel are achievable and what are not? Because I know from working in a business background, you want achievable goals. You don't want to put out projects that nobody's going to attain. And I think that's a mistake sometimes that gets made. Projects get put out with the end result being something that's very difficult to achieve, or it's just not going to happen. And then everybody's got the disappointment factor and a lot of issues start to arise. So I'd like to take a look at the list, and I think the rest of council should look at it and be realistic about what can we do based on our financial restraints and everything else we're dealing with, and come to some sort of a neutral ground that we think we can achieve. I think we can't disappoint ourselves as well as our residents with unachievable goals.
Can you make sure that's sent out to council?
Yeah, I guess I'd like to make a further suggestion, which would be, perhaps we could use some future opportunity for a training and development session where the Transform Waterloo Region folks could come and present to council. And provide an overview as well. And certainly, I think that would help. Because again, we had a representative at the table in terms of Ann Roberts, but if Ann was here, and this is no disrespect to her, she would say she was our staff representative at the table, but she wasn't there because she had specific expertise in climate change and sustainability. She was there to make sure that we had a touch point there and she could flow information back to us so we could stay informed. But ultimately, again, we have never had the expertise on staff to be able to be fully engaged at that table in the development of that. But however, naturally, you can appreciate when all of the delegations came forward several years ago to the region, the cities and the townships, all of the councils were putting up their hand committed to it. But sometimes, and I guess partly to Councillor Bryant's point, there has to be an understanding at some point with what that means in terms of what's realistic, what are the resources, what is the funding, and what is the commitment that's prepared to do. And clearly last week showed that, there's a 3-3 division. So somehow we have to develop a path forward.
Okay, so I've heard quite a bit here tonight. I also think, last term of council, did we not get a list of projects that we had done on the climate action front? I wonder if we could resurrect that and maybe update it and get that out to council. Would council like to have a training session with, yeah. Okay, so we can get Ray to set that up. I think also there was, we've talked a little bit about different projects that we've done. So we get that report on the projects that have been done and maybe projects that are considered now in the current budget. Is that premature to ask for that?
Say that again.
So I think you said that staff have already talked about some projects that would work towards sustainability for the 2024 budget, or did I miss here?
What we are in the process of that. We haven't developed.
So it's premature.
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything else that staff would like from, that council would like from staff? No, staff, you don't get to tell us.
And again, I just want to emphasize to council, I'm being very passionate about things because we had a long discussion at senior management. The struggle is real. We are a growing, thriving municipality. And whether it's having to, as somebody mentioned, now pivot and participate in a 45 review of the province, or whether it's, pivoting on the servicing and the infrastructure front, those sorts of things, there are real challenges that our staff are involved in. And, we see it on our day-to-day staff. There's only so much capacity. And we want to make a difference in the climate change sustainability sphere, but you can only do that if you, one, have the expertise, and two, have the capacity and ability to achieve those results. So that's what I want to emphasize, that is coming from your senior management team, is we want to be able to achieve what we need to do to make a difference. At the same time, we have to work with council in terms of, what your ultimate expectations are going forward. If I could summarize, what our hope is, and if this fits with council and there's consensus, is, certainly what we heard last week, unless it's changed, is there was still a willingness to entertain the sustainability position as part of the broader budget discussion. At the same time, what I've added conceivably this evening is other ways to establish resources and a commitment to obtain that, even if that was to potentially, hire external support. And then outside of that, further to Councillor Schwint's comments, we'll continue to put forward as part of our normal budget process, certain projects on a very low level that can be handled, from existing workload and capacity, nothing more, is what our norm is. And I appreciate that, Councillor Schwinn has asked that we try to think outside the box. My only parameters would be but again, within existing capacities to be able to readily achieve things. Because if we can bring ideas forward, but to Councillor Bryan's point, if we can't achieve them with in-house capacities, then they're just ideas that will sit there and not be acted upon. That's the concern.
Councillor Schwint.
I guess I'm not opposed to adding resources to manage projects or to achieve projects. I'm opposed to adding people to dream up the projects and report back on what's happening. So if during the budget process, for example, there's 3 projects you think are valuable, but you just can't do with your existing staff, quite happy to entertain hiring outside resources to manage that project. That was kind of where I was trying to go with my ideas, develop the ideas now so we can incorporate them in the budget for next year.
Councillor Burgess.
Yeah, through you, Chair Shantz. Similar thing to what Councillor Schwinn was saying, but just clarity on the Transform Waterloo region. Do they at all provide guidance or discuss stuff with each municipality and township? If like someone has a great idea, they pass it on others or provide guidance how to get to those 50 by 30, 80 by 50 that we can then use an extra staff person or other resources for.
Yeah.
So my experience through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Burgess, my experience has been a couple-fold in terms of a lot of the work that these groups do is very much policy and the development of these types of programs. Yes, they will be relied upon in terms of guidance, but we don't get any capacity support to actually action and do. But yes, as you would have heard from Tova Davidson, we get good guidance from Sustainable Waterloo Region. However, we can't get tangible actions from there. They just provide guidance in terms of if we have sufficient resources, here's how you might want to go about executing something, right? For example, we have a volunteer green team, and they're able to do a certain amount of stuff, but only within the capacity of, because they're volunteers, they do it off the side of their desk as volunteers to do things like, for example, look at ways in which we can do simple things. And this is really low hanging fruit, making sure that staff, when they're not in their offices or in meeting rooms, turning off lights, because some of our places don't have the automatic turnoffs. Making sure that when we're doing changes in washrooms or things like that, the suggestion is that, you don't have taps that can just stay on, that they turn off. Looking at whether we would be better off to have electric dryers versus paper towels and things like that. So we are able to benefit from research, that I've seen Sustainable Waterloo Region even provide us on that. But that's the level of support that they're able to do because they have their own realities that they need to execute on. I hope that helps.
Councillor Cadeau.
Thank you, Chair. If I may just add to that, we have heard from Transform Waterloo Region, and one of the key pieces of advice that they've been giving us is to hire a sustainability coordinator. So I'll just kind of make that plug.
So do you think that we'll be able to get them in before January, before budget?
Well, we'll ask. For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, we'll certainly try to get them in before then.
Okay, so
We have more meetings than the school board.
great. Is that enough direction for the time being? Is everyone kind of satisfied with where we've gone with this discussion and where we're heading with it? Sort of, kind of, almost lukewarm. Everybody's a little lukewarm. I guess that's maybe a good thing when you're split 50-50. Okay, well, we'll get that session organized then and have what sustain Waterloo region, no, Waterloo. Transform Waterloo region, thank you. In for a session with us, and we will look to the budget for some good guidance on costing and pros and cons to a few different options that have been thrown out. Is there anything else? Excuse me. Is there anything else that anyone wants to report? No. Outstanding activity list. Seeing nothing, there is no notice of motion. We have the bylaws then. We need first and second readings for one of our bylaws, and that is a provisional bylaw to adopt an engineer's report for Breslaw Drain 1. We're doing first and second reading, and we'll do third reading at another day. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Grant, Councillor Bryant, all those in favor? Thank you. And then for first, second, and third readings and final passing, that the following bylaws in the hands of the clerk be read a first, second, third time and finally passed, that they be numbered as bylaw number 68-2023 to 69-2023, and that they be signed, excuse me, by the mayor and clerk and sealed with the corporate seal. And that is a bylaw to further amend zoning bylaw 55-86. That's the 76 Howard Ave that we did tonight, and a bylaw to confirm all actions and proceedings of council. Moved by Councillor Grant, seconded by Councillor Cadeau. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And that does bring us to the end of our meeting. Would anyone like to adjourn? Councillor Bryant, Councillor Cadeau, all those in favor? And that's carried. And so thank you to all who participated, attended, or tuned into the meeting tonight. Our gallery has cleared out. Council, please stay connected and on Zoom until the live stream has stopped. And I will say good night to everyone.